Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Nichole Lee, I am so pleased that we have the opportunity to talk today. I've been looking forward to this sharing of information ever since I saw you online. So thanks for joining us.
Bob, I'm so happy to be here and thank you for the opportunity.
Nichole, one of my signature questions that I ask is, if you go back and think about when you were a child, what you wanted to be when you grew up, what was that?
Bob, this will probably not surprise you, but I wanted to be a talk show host. I found some documents actually from when my mother passed. She had a lot of things boxed up. And I actually found where I had written out different episodes for my talk show. And I was a very deep child. Like I had things around the impact of alcohol and experiences of homelessness and things of that nature, even as a young child. Yeah, that's what I wanted to be. And I've always wanted to connect with people and always found humans very interesting. So I was not surprised even when I reflected on that from finding that information that my mom had kept for me.
Nichole, tell us, what were the transition moments that you've gone through then in your life from that time you saw yourself as a young child as a talk show host to where you're at today?
Oh man, so many transitions. Well, even when I think about the shift as a child from transitioning to different schools and connecting with different people, that was something that I went through quite a bit, whether it was in grade school, then high school, and then I left Michigan to then go to college in Florida. So another transition of a new location, different environment, things of that nature. That then led to outside of college, I then transitioned into consulting. So that was definitely a significant shift. I ended up in a consulting role where I traveled all the time, like 75% of the time. And then in consulting, you automatically have many transitions because you basically what they call roll on or roll off of projects, right? So I worked in multiple industries, multiple clients, multiple environments, traveling domestically and internationally, having to shift and transition cultures, industries, etc. So the bulk of my career has been its own transition in itself, being in the consulting world. I've moved a few times, so those are transitions. And then recently, unfortunately, my mother passed away in 2018, and that led to the biggest, I think, most impactful transition for me in recognizing that I was not living in my calling and purpose, and I left my 20-year career behind to now serve as a coach and guide and helping individuals with their significant life transitions.
Nichole, I want to first spend a little bit of time in today's episode talking about personal authenticity. How do you think understanding one's core values, their strengths, their talents, that can help guide individuals during their transition periods?
So many times during transition periods, there's a lot of sense of overwhelm There's a lot of sense of the questions, who am I? What am I to do now? And I believe that grounding, getting rooted back into your values or even reconnecting with your values is really important. It serves as a foundation of providing a bit of clarity where you may have uncertainty. When you're faced with several different choices and paths that you can take, so typically when we talk about career paths, sometimes individuals may be going from one type of industry or modality to another, and those core values are typically foundational. So regardless of which way you move, you're still clear on where you stand and what you desire and what you want. The other thing that I find with this is it allows you to have something that you can move forward in and bringing your most of your value and being able to articulate what's most important to you. So many times when we go through transition, sometimes we feel that we're not as much in control, and we will relinquish some of that control and allowing others to tell us what we need to do. When you get grounded back into your values, you're now having a dialogue about what's important to you and getting to check in on whatever career paths or journeys that you decide and making sure that it aligns to what you desire.
And if I'm trying to decide what my core values, what are they? Do you have any tips, techniques that our listeners could use to determine that?
Yeah, so I would say things like, what is most important to you? Many times, if we're talking about it, say from a career perspective, things about the environment, the culture. We know, especially during the pandemic, there was a lot of hybrid work or remote work. Is that important to you? Is that of value to you? Sometimes core values are more from the situational perspectives. What are the things that you really stand on? What does integrity mean to you? What does accountability mean to you? So I think starting to ask these types of questions are really, really important so that you set up your own value set. That then allows you once again to check in with the opportunities that are available to you to ensure that it is actually a place that you want to land. Because I also find that when you don't do that, many times you go into environments that aren't going to meet your needs. And then you find out after the fact.
Knowing this about yourself, knowing your core values, checking in on them, how is that going to help me in my job search process?
So when we think about many jobs and them being posted online, typically there are mission, vision, and values that are actually set there. If you haven't gone through your own check-in with your value set, then you don't really have things to gauge if it's worthwhile for you to invest in pursuing, and vice versa. If someone is sending you information about an opportunity and you aren't clear of what those values and requirements are for you, then you don't have something to gauge of whether that might be an opportunity that you want to invest time into pursuing. So this is, again, where there's a lot of times there's information that organizations have available, but we're not taking that information and filtering it through our own internal check to ensure that there's enough that aligns for us in wanting to move forward in those opportunities. If you get past that, even in an interview, having those core values set, you start to ask questions that are beyond just the skills and talents. You start asking, for example, if a core value for you from a career perspective is autonomy or having the ability for innovation or being in a collaborative team, you start to ask questions that are more intentional around those types of values. That allows you to have more insight and information in your decision-making process.
You once told me, Nichole, that you should ask people that you've worked with to help you identify what your superpowers are.
Yes.
What does that mean?
I believe we all have these innate gifts, which are things that we just are great at that we sometimes can't explain, right? People just know you're really awesome at it. You didn't have to pick up a book or read, a document. It's just innately been in you. And so sometimes, though, because those are things that you naturally do, you don't recognize that they actually are a superpower. They actually are something that can help propel you in your career and life. And so I offer individuals to actually ask questions from people that they trust and know to ask that type of question. Hey, what do you sense and feel that I'm really good at, that I just knock it out of the park? What I found by inviting even my clients to do that, there are certain attributes that they didn't even think about. They just weren't on their radar because they focus so much on skills and talents. And to me, skills and talents are things that we can learn, we can build, and we can grow. And once again, gifts are things that just naturally happen for us. So sometimes we're not even conscious of them. And that's why I do invite individuals to ask others what they see as their superpower.
And then you followed up with that when you know these strengths, these talents, these gifts, that you can often show multiple skills that are transferable to other types of roles and other industries. Did I get that right?
Yes. So what typically happens too when we're going through transitions, particularly if we're switching areas. So for example, we'll just use an example. If you have been in finance and you've only focused on what was required in your finance role or what you've been rewarded or recognized to do that type of function, you may not have spent as much time recognizing some of the other skills, talents, and gifts. So if you're someone who has to do auditing, for example, you may not really be tapping in or recognize that you're a natural, you engage with people really well, that you're an amazing active listener, that you have creative thoughts and perspectives about how you do your work, that you've been an innovator in optimizing processes, things of that nature. So when you start to look at those, then if you decide that you want to go into a different function, say you want to go into technology, for example, you may feel as though those are not relatable or transferable, but taking the time to do that inventory, you recognize being innovative is amazing in technology, right? Being a people person, depending on the type of role, is really important. Your detail orientation that you may have had in finance can lend itself into a tech role. So once again, it helps get you out of feeling pigeonholed into one opportunity and recognizing that you actually have more to offer across several different industries or backgrounds or disciplines.
I've talked before on an earlier episode about people sometimes define their network as being too narrow. How do you view that, and how can you expand that network, and what will that give to you?
I think sometimes too, depending on how you define network and how you have been encouraged to build your network, can be part of the challenge. So sometimes I even shift from the word network, which sometimes feels transactional to individuals. And this is what I've come across when I speak with others, like, oh, that feels so tense and fake, and I'm only having to do it because I need it for X. Versus what are the connections you want to make? What are the relationships that you want to have? What do they look like? What do they sound like? What do they feel like? So when you start to shift into that type of connection and relationship, you start to find that you desire it to be expanded beyond, say, the discipline you've been working in, or once again, the industry you've been working in. And you start to look at it from a personal relationship perspective that's not even just short term, but long term. And so when you start to do that, you actually start to find that you have a greater interest to connect with individuals, because it could be even based on interest. It could be based on geography. It could be based on a passion or a curiosity. Those things start to lend to an easier connection to people. And I will also find that we came out of the pandemic, which was very difficult for many of us to make intimate connections. Coming out of that, people are desiring personal connections. People are desiring to be seen and heard beyond what they do. So if you're positioning yourself that way, you will automatically create a great opportunity for people to have a natural interest in you and you to have a natural interest in them. And so that's the one thing I would just invite individuals, is to start to look at it from a human connection and interest perspective, than something that has to be done that feels very transactional.
Nichole, since so many of the interviews today are done either over the telephone or over Zoom, How do you coach your clients to help them make that personal connection over technology?
What's interesting, I think because we've also gotten so used to or conditioned with the fact that, oh, I have to see the person or I have to be in person for them to feel and sense who I am and the sense of authenticity. What I have found is also to just look inward. What would feel good to you if someone reached out, if you couldn't get on Zoom, you couldn't see them? And what's interesting is you find that you have the answer. Maybe they found something interesting on my LinkedIn page that we had something in common. And I just send them a genuine note based on the commonality. That leads to, once again, a human connection, a genuine, authentic connection that all of us deeply desire, that makes it very natural and easy to then lead into other things that you may desire to share, or you may want to set up a phone call, to have the Zoom call. I still go back to just the fact that we are humans desiring connection and communication. And starting at that kind of baseline, I think is the easiest thing for us to do. I think we've just forgotten because there's so many things that are influencing us that everything has to be a strategy, that everything has to be a technique. And I find that just sitting with yourself and thinking about what feels good to you and how you'd want people to reach out to you that feels authentic and genuine is what you can give right back out to the world.
Nichole, as people transition from one phase of their career to another, from one job to another, there's often a period of self-reflection and maybe even rediscovery. Can you share an example or two of someone who has used a job transition as an opportunity to reconnect with their true self and redefine maybe their purpose?
Yes. So I had an example with one of my clients that was a C-level executive that had gone through all of the steps to get to that level of success and realized that it actually wasn't what was really driving them, was really their passion. And they really had an interest to really pursue entrepreneurship. Now, you can imagine spending all of that time investing in the requirements and expectations from that corporate perspective could leave a bit of, once again, asking, who am I? What am I going to do now? How do I transfer these skills? How do I see myself differently? And so this was an opportunity, again, to go in and reflect on what your core values are. What are your passions? What are your interests? What really lights you up? What is starting to spark this need and desire to take that leap from the world that you thought you wanted to be in to now this new world? And so one of the things that I offer individuals quite often is to become curious. So a lot of these questions are prompted through curiosity and not judgment. Many times as adults, we have thought when we ask why from either a clarity point or from a judgment point. We have clarity from I have to have the answer right now, judgment, there's something wrong. When you come from a question of curiosity, then you open up the opportunity to explore and discover and be okay with what comes up. And sometimes that something might not come up in that moment. And so that's, to me, what rediscovering yourself looks like. It's starting to ask all of these different questions so that you actually can start to see different facets of yourself that you may have even suppressed or didn't realize was there because you were focused on one area.
How might you become unstuck in the career path that you're on? Like that C-suite person, it was easier for him to just keep being a corporate person.
Yes. So to your point, it was going to be easier for her in that sense, right, to continue going on that path. What I found in the stuckness is really overwhelm. And so that overwhelm sometimes is translated, I'm stuck, I can't move. Well, overwhelm means that there's too much, which can create that same level of stuckness and lack of clarity. So one of the things that I highly recommend is acknowledging that this is a major shift and that it is overwhelming to consider all of the actions that have to occur for you to move forward. So in our own bodies, we have body intelligence. When we don't feel safe, our body will go into different responses. One of them is freezing, feeling stuck. And so part of allowing yourself to reset and acknowledge that that is what's occurring allows you to then start to think about the small steps that you can take to start to create that level of comfort and clarity. Because once again, if I've been a C-suite executive or I've been in corporate, similar to my situation for 20 years, there is a level of familiarity with that. There is a level of comfort in that. There is a level of control that you typically sense and feel in that environment. To think about all of the different things that have to change for you to shift can be overwhelming, even if you're a high-performing individual. Thinking about how you have to reposition yourself, how you have to explain things, how you have to maybe adjust things in your personal life is a lot to take on. So once you've acknowledged that it is a huge shift, there's a lot that you're carrying and there's a sense of overwhelm, then we do start to say, where is the one place that we can start that you feel comfortable making movement? Where I found that that is the most comfortable is when we start talking about the personal attributes. We start shifting you out of what you do and how people have tied you to the identity to who you are and who you want to be. Now, one way to do that is doing a quick little inventory. Who are you in this environment, in that environment, right? In work, with your friends, with colleagues, with your volunteer group, to start to see the different attributes that you have. Who are you being when you're at rest, when you're at play, when you're just enjoying life? What does that look like? How do you describe yourself if you had to pick 5 adjectives? This is when you also connect with your friends or family, people you trust, and you say, what are my superpowers? What are the things that people most know me for outside of my job? So you get this beautiful inventory, right? List of all these amazing attributes about yourself that you can start to think about how that shows up in the next phase of your life.
And I would imagine that journaling is a tool that you could use to help you in this inventory and to see where you've been and where you're going.
Yes. And what I have found sometimes, Bob, depending on where individuals are from an overwhelm perspective, that starting with the connections with people or just writing just what lights you up and kind of answering those feels comfortable, and it actually starts building that muscle to then get to, okay, I'm going to start journaling thoughts. And journaling can be very helpful to do that, to your point. What I recommend, especially for individuals that feel overwhelmed, or if you're required to do a lot of writing in your job, to either do voice notes, to do doodling, to find some other playful way to spark the creative side of you that is not tied to the critical or perfection part that may be part of many people's occupation. So for me, being in consulting, there was an expectation, right, of expertise, execution in a certain way. And I found journaling was difficult for me at first because I kept checking in of how I'm writing and, if I'm following the protocol of the prompts. And when I went to just free writing, it started allowing my body to actually feel safe just to write without judgment. So I offer that because I've had that with clients as well that are like, I get stuck even journaling, right? Or even starting that process. So we do voice notes or we do doodling, as I mentioned, or just free writing. And I will add, sometimes we put expectations on how long we actually need to do the activity. If you are overwhelmed and highly stressed, I invite individuals to start with 60 seconds. Just do a minute and then build up to 2, 5, 10, 15. Many times individuals' nervous system is shot. You've done so much, you're under high stress, so adding something else can feel like a lot. So starting small and then building up is another recommendation that I offer.
Let's go with that emotion roller coaster that you're describing. Job transitions can certainly bring just a host of emotions. How have you seen the emotional toll manifest itself in people who are transitioning? And why do you think it's important to acknowledge and address those feelings?
If we think about any type of transition, there is an element of saying goodbye to some element, right? And stepping into a state of the unknown. And so if we don't give ourselves time to process that, those emotions show up in different spaces and places. That's where sometimes anxiety or grief or even anger can be expressed, and we're not recognizing that it was actually tied to that transition. So honoring yourself and kind of checking in of what's happening as a result of that transition is important. And one of the things too is it's not always about the times that you may have gotten laid off or something where you weren't in control. Even being in control of your transition can bring about these feelings of loss, anxiety, fear of the unknown. So also want to recognize that it's not based on one or the other. It's very natural for us to go through this process, even if we're excited about the next phase that's coming up for our lives. So recognizing the emotional shift in you is crucial so that you don't repeat certain behaviors and you give yourself permission to heal. One of the things that I think you and I were talking about as well is sometimes we're not realizing how painful those things are and we haven't given ourselves time to heal through them. Transitions can feel very traumatic. And so if we don't give ourselves permission to heal, as I was saying before, you can repeat patterns. You can have responses or what sometimes people call triggers to situations that you're not aware are actually tied to the transition. So it's really, really important to start asking yourself, what emotions am I feeling? And allowing yourself to feel those emotions. Once again, I bring up the sense of releasing judgment. Many times, individuals have been in situations where they feel they're going to be judged for having an emotion of grief or sadness or anger tied to their transition, which then suppresses those emotions and creates even levels of symptoms of depression. So allowing yourself to go through an exercise of what am I feeling? Why am I feeling this? What are the situations that I don't want to occur again that may have created these feelings? And what are the ways that I can help myself heal? That could be talking with a friend. That could be having a therapist. That could be having a coach. It could be things like journaling. It could be going out in nature. It could be meditation. The other thing that I'm getting to is helping you figure out the ways that are best to help you also cope and manage in the event that you have situations in the future. What I find a lot of times with multiple transitions, when you don't have these tools, your ability to be resilient and bounce back becomes very difficult. So spending that time to figure out what those tools are to help you with your resiliency is really important to help you just moving forward with any type of life transition. I know we're talking about career, but any type of life transition.
And Nichole, are there any other books or other resources that you would recommend to someone that's going through that job transition?
Yeah, so there are a few assessments that I love to help individuals that are transitioning or wanting a different perspective on themselves as they look for a new career opportunity. One is How to Fascinate. So it is a personality assessment. There are a lot of assessments out there that are tied to your talents, your skills, your strengths, and I'll talk about one that I like as well in that space. I really love Fascinate though because it is more of your personality. And what it focuses on is what are the attributes of you that fascinate other people. It's kind of getting to your superpowers in a different way. And then it gives you insight and tools of how you can leverage that in the workplace. It also shares with you what they call kind of your dormant or the things that don't serve you and don't help people be fascinated by you, which I find very fascinating, pun intended, and helping you recognize that you actually may be leveraging some of those personality traits that aren't serving you. So that one's I highly recommend. I offer that with my clients and I've taken the assessment and it was super helpful for me. And there's an archetype to each one. My archetype is the people's champion. So not surprising with the type of work I do, but that's one. The other is Strengths Finder. So I find that Fascinate and Strengths Finder are great in complementing because Strengths Finder is an assessment that focuses on your strengths and how to leverage your strengths, whether it's pursuing opportunities or in your current environment and not focusing as much on the areas of development or quote unquote weaknesses. I don't care for that word, but it really is about taking advantage of your strengths. It also provides tools of how you articulate your strengths, environments, how you connect with people and interaction. So those are two types of assessments if people are into assessments that I find to be helpful with those transitions. As far as also, I have a podcast that's all about transcending. And it's about transcending identities, beliefs, and environments. And so it's stories of individuals who have also gone through major life transitions. Some have been very challenging and how they've got on the other side. And they share some great tips and guidance on how to do that across all different types of life experiences.
Nichole, we have covered so many great ideas, so many suggestions for someone who is going through a transition. If you remind them of 3 key things that they should keep in mind, what are those 3 things?
So I would say one is you are not alone. And I think sometimes when going through transitions, we sense and feel that it's just us, whether it's the feelings, the experience, etc. So you aren't alone. And so I would highly invite you to connect with other people. And sometimes it's connecting with people that are outside of your normal group. There are several different ways to do that. LinkedIn, there's Facebook groups, there's meetup groups, things of that nature. So if you're needing just additional support of feeling seen and heard and not alone, I just want to remind individuals of that. The second is that your transition, positive, negative, or in between, does not define you. And so many times when we're going through transitions, we do take all of that personally and feel that it defines us and how we have to show up in the world. So I just want to remind you that a transition is just a change, right? And it is an invitation for a fresh start. It is an opportunity to rediscover, realign, and even create the next chapter of your life the way you really desire it to be. So taking that time to look at it from that perspective can also create new possibilities for yourself that you may not have considered. The third is ensuring that you do take the time to just be. And what I mean by that is whether that's doing something that you love, trying a new thing that you've never explored before, but it's been on your list. Some people have a bucket list. Taking action in a way that is not always tied to the career or transition helps to reinvigorate that excitement about life. Life is to be lived, and life is about fulfilling and exciting experiences. So I invite you to find that one thing that lights you up, that, like I say, you may not have done in a really long time, and leverage that as an opportunity to ignite the fire in you as it relates to your next phase of life.
Nichole, I can say this for myself, and I'm sure for many of my listeners, you help reinvigorate me towards life and towards the learning of how I can most effectively transition, whether it's jobs or any of life events. So I want to thank you so much for your time and for sharing the tips that you did.
Bob, thank you again for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.